All right. We're getting live here, just making sure everything's working. I know that what I say and what's on screen is in a delay, so I don't see that it's live, so I'm just going to keep talking for a second until I see that the video is up and we're rolling. There we go. Now it looks like it's good for me. All right, let's do this. So we are second episode of Live from the Lincoln Desk. Thank you so much for joining us. It's still July. It's still really, really nice out. I can't tell you the number of times that I've reached out to someone saying, hey, let's meet, let's talk about the campaign. And they're like, well, we're traveling or kids are home, we're still having fun. So we know that these early episodes of Live from the Lincoln Desk, we're going to have a number of people who will be joining us come, let's say, August and September, who won't be with us this early. But it's important we get the process going. We get people used to every Tuesday night we're going to be here. And we actually had a number of questions submitted this week prior to the episode. A few people who couldn't be with us who had questions they wanted answered. So we're going to be rolling through all those questions. And I know a lot of people will watch afterwards. But for those of you who are here with me, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, please jump into the chat, pop them in there. It doesn't have to be on the challenges that working families face, especially young families. That's kind of our theme for the week. So if you ask a question off of that, I'll probably bring it back to the theme. But I'll try to get through all our questions, even if the ones that aren't on theme come through. I'll get through those best I can. Before we start that, I want to share, for those who maybe aren't aware, my wife and I shared today that she is pregnant with our second child. We are really, really excited. We for sure wanted a second kid, but I'll be honest, after Teddy, we didn't know that we'd be able to have another kid. We were just so grateful to have him that for both of us, it was one of those situations where if we got another one, we'd be grateful, but you just count the blessings that you have. It took us over 6 years to have Teddy, and I'll tell the story in a second. So we really didn't have this on our radar at all. And clearly we've been pretty focused on a campaign. The timing is admittedly maybe not the most thought through, but this wasn't our planned timing, so here we are. So I am running for governor, and also my wife is pregnant with our second child. Our Scratch research team found out this is actually not the first time that this has happened. Jim Thompson, his wife gave birth in the first year of his governorship, and Rob Blagojevich, his wife, gave birth in the first year of him being governor. So this would not be a first for Illinois, which is kind of interesting. But I do want to quickly share our journey. Thanks for the congratulations, guys. You guys are awesome. I want to give you our journey briefly, mostly because I know we've got people still coming on and we want to give them a chance to get on, and then we'll get into our topics and answering your questions. But I think this is important because it's why we're talking about young families this week. When my wife and I got married, the first year of our marriage, she got cancer. She has had Crohn's since she was 8 or 9 and had it really bad. And I know she and her parents spent a lot of time in hospitals and doctors' offices. Really has been a struggle for her, and she's the toughest woman I know. And so when we made our vows and said in sickness and in health, we didn't realize that was going to be tested in year one. And it actually happened in the lead up to an election. So that was back when I was still running my political companies. We had dozens of candidates and political clients, and she was in the hospital for 17 days. So I was sitting by her side, and we had a whole setup on the edge of the room where I had a computer and a whole, wasn't nowadays where you could just do everything from your phone. So we had all sorts of devices in there and ran a whole bunch of campaigns from my wife's hospital room. It was a very interesting election. So if you think I'm actually pretty experienced in dealing with elections plus other things, other drama, other challenges. So this isn't new for us. My family likes to take on 10 things at a time, I guess. So Abby, the warrior that she is, she beat cancer, and she is cancer-free now, and it's awesome. We have a lot of really good friends who ask occasionally how she's doing, and it really means the world to me and to her when you do that, just because it's clearly somebody who knows us, who's known us for a long time, who remembers the early days when Abby was dealing with some challenges. But she's been healthy for a while, and that's awesome. One of the side effects or results, I guess, of both the cancer and the surgery and solution to the cancer and the treatment was we were told that it was highly unlikely, extremely unlikely, that we would be able to get pregnant naturally. We still tried over 3 years. and it didn't happen. So that's when we moved to IVF. It took 3 years of IVF, round after round after round. It was, for those of you who have been through IVF, if you're the female who's been through it, I feel for you. It is awful, not fun at all. My wife went through it, and there's only so much that the spouse can do, that the supporter can do. I did what I could, but I mean, what she had to put her body through, I thank her regularly, because it's awful what she had to go through, especially as each round got more and more difficult and more invasive. And my part of it was paying for it, so more and more expensive, because insurance covers very little of this. Illinois is actually pretty good, but insurance covers very little. And so it wiped out our savings and then some. But 3 years of it, and that's when we found out. So we got pregnant. Got really excited. We had just informed our family, and we were just really, really excited to finally be able to start our family. And then we lost that pregnancy. It was really a dark time for us. We stayed close, my wife and I, of course, but just for us personally and mentally, it was a really dark time. We were about to give up. We went through several more rounds of IVF, and we were about to give up, to be honest. We were having the second to last transfer. And we were almost just thinking, just do the last transfer and move on. We're done. This isn't going to work. And it's mentally exhausting going through IVF, especially when the number one thing I've always wanted to be is dad. It's the only title I've ever wanted. And so we kind of hit our wits' end, and then it worked. We got pregnant with Teddy, and it was a high-risk pregnancy. There were definitely a lot of challenges, but as always, my wife was a warrior, and we worked through it. Had a lot of great doctors, and Teddy was born, and he was our miracle boy. One of the reasons we chose the name Theodore is it means gift of God, and we truly believe that our little boy was a gift from God and was our miracle baby. So that's why I say it's anything after that is gravy. And Teddy has been amazing. He's over 2 now. He is our little mischief maker, and then some. So when we found out we were pregnant, especially in the midst of the campaign, it was like, okay, well, the first one took 6 years plus, and lots of money, lots of stress, lots of challenges. This one just happened. Okay. So another miracle this time. Didn't require as much human intervention. It's interesting. I've read the studies, and even some of our doctors told Abby and I that oftentimes when you have that first successful pregnancy, it can open you up potentially to another one down the road. I guess 1 in 5 times that happens. So that's pretty interesting. I guess we're the 1 out of the 5. So baby 2 is on the way, due in January. And my wife and I are super excited. We'll see. Our Teddy had to be had early, so more than likely this next one will come a little early, which means it'll probably fall between Election Day and inauguration. So you are still free to vote for me. I won't have to have Carolyn handle the first few months of being governor while I take care of our little one. I can do both things. Abby will be giving birth prior to inauguration, so we can make this work. It'll all work. And my family's amazing. They've been super helpful with Abby even before we knew of the pregnancy. I know they'll continue that with the little one, the second little one that comes. We do know the gender. I don't know how Abby wants to announce that, but I'm of course let her decide if and how that gets announced. I'm just really excited that we've got another little one on the way. Now the stress is on to come up with a good name, because Theodore Rex is an epic name. It's T-Rex is his nickname. He's not quite there yet. He's still Teddy because he's little and he's cute, but eventually he'll be T-Rex. I mentioned Theodore and the meaning that has to us, and also Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents. So there was a lot of meaning with Teddy's name. And of course, I love dinosaurs. I'm a little bit of a geek. I've always loved dinosaurs, so that fit in with the T-Rex. So there was a lot packed in. I don't know that we're going to be able to come up with a name that's that meaningful for kid number 2. We have a theme, so there's a start. We're going to work off of that. But the stress, the pressure is on. It'll be harder to do that than it will be to run for governor. So whatever, we'll have some fun with it. That's why we're talking young families. You know, when my wife and I talk about the stress and the challenges that young families face, it's because we're living it right now. And so we're going to talk about those issues this week. We're going to talk about those issues here on this live. As I mentioned, we put out an email and did some social media posts asking people, what are the challenges you face as a young family? And Lane actually is still adding to the doc that I see here. So people are still sending stuff in. So I'm going to try to bounce back and forth, and I'm going to try to stop whacking my microphones. If you noticed during the podcast last week, I whacked the microphone once. My team really wishes I could be a little bit more professional and stop doing that. Anyways, so let's get to your questions, get to your comments. My question to you is, what are the challenges that you have faced, either in starting a family, or maybe it's in financially raising a family, taking care of your family, or it could be kids or grandkids that you've heard these stories from. But share to me maybe challenges you have faced, or again, ask your questions. We'll bounce them back and forth between the two. Let me look in the questions. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, handful of people saying congratulations, which is awesome. Michelle, question on blood alcohol content from 0.08 to 0.05. I'll admit I don't know enough about it. Of course, I don't like any semblance of drunk driving. I have supported MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and a number of similar initiatives and organizations. So it's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I know it is to my wife as well. So anything that could reduce the number of drunk drivers we have in the street, I'm going to seriously consider. I did see Didich, his bill, at the time when it was filed, and I remember looking at it and not knowing how I felt about it. On the one hand, again, I think any sort of drunk driving is something I don't want to see. On the other hand, I'd like to hear from some proponents and some opponents, if there are opponents, law enforcement. How fast, how easy is it for some people to get to, let's say, 0.05 versus 0.08? And is this something that would backfire? I'd like to know that before taking a firm stance on it. Again, I'm always going to err on the side of safety and keeping families safe. I mean, we are moving very rapidly towards what some have described as transportation as a service, which I think is an interesting way of describing it, which is what these automated vehicle companies want. They want a future where you and I don't own a car. You just open the app, whatever vehicle pops in, and you hop in it. That seems like it may be super far in the future, but you see how fast technology is moving. And so one of the frustrations that I have had is these decisions within the space of transportation that don't take into account the future. Whether that's public transit, we just saw a ton of money being put into public transit. And post-COVID, a whole lot of people are no longer taking public transit. And listen, I understand how important public transit is. Love taking the train into the city. It's so much more convenient than driving. And so I get it. I understand the need for it. But we are in a post-COVID world where so many people work from home, so few people take public transit. And so this idea that we should just dump more money and do the same system instead of reforming that system and thinking about how should it look for the future is something that frustrated me, because we see that all the time with Illinois government. If you saw in the podcast we did, Lou and I, last week, my campaign chairman, we talked about not only the lack of technology in Illinois government, with some of these government agencies and departments being back still in the 80s in the technology that they utilize, but also the lack of forward thinking. We don't really have a leader in Pritzker who in many ways thinks about how the world's going to look in 10, 20 years, because really for him, it's just about his run for president. I will give him credit. Quantum is the one area that he clearly is thinking long term. And so I'll certainly give him credit for that. I always want to be fair. But within government, there's not a lot of thought about how departments and agencies should look, especially, again, as we're going into this new world that's in front of us. I think I said it in one of my social media posts, and I'll butcher it now. I loved the line when I came up with it, and now I can't remember it. Something like, we are barreling into an AI-driven world with a state government that still uses stone tablets. It was close to that. I'm going to find it so I can remember it and use it again in the future. But that's where we're at. And so when you think about coming back to 0.05, the blood alcohol content debate, driving is going to be less of a thing in the near future. So how many more changes are we going to make to the current system, or are we going to start thinking about what the next system looks like? By the way, personally, when it comes to driving, I love driving. I love, love, love my car. It's the thing I love most beyond, of course, my wife and my family. So giving up driving, that's going to be something that I don't know that I'm ever going to be willing to do. So I'm not saying that I'm on board with what that future may look like, but let's be real. It's coming, and we need to start thinking about it. Michelle, awesome question. What I can promise you is I will dig into it. It's something I know I need to know more about, because as governor, I will need to take a position on it. So thanks for the question. Continue to put in your thoughts or your questions into the chat. I'm going to pop over. I know I had a question on Facebook, so I want to answer that. Let me go over and find it. I got to Alt-Tab to get on the right screen. 1 second here. Okay, so Tabitha asked a question, and it's a really good question, and it actually goes to family and goes to safety. Tabitha is focused on protecting children and supporting law enforcement and doing that specifically. And what's interesting is Tabitha asked about Flock, and I've had 7, 8 people reach out asking about Flock after the Republican candidate took his position on Flock. So I'm going to answer this in 2 parts to Tabitha and to everyone else. We're going to talk Flock second because it's going to be a whole topic. We'll come back to that. First, I want to ask, because Tabitha had several other questions related to child safety. So first, I'll answer those. So she asked, what are your plans to support law enforcement in investigating and preventing crimes against children, including online child exploitation and human trafficking? This is an awesome question. So I've had the opportunity over the years to support organizations that have focused on trafficking, human trafficking, especially child trafficking, but human trafficking in general is something that happens way more than people realize. And I wish I had the stats memorized. I could maybe pull them up real quick, but I don't want to screw this up and do it too fast. So maybe I'll post it on my social this week. But the stats were eye-opening. They played a video at one of the events that I was at that I'll admit brought me to tears because they're focused on kids and how many kids are trafficked. And you don't realize this is happening in your backyard. It's happening in Illinois. We hear about it and we assume it's another country, another state, another continent where this is happening, but it's not. So I'm glad Tabitha brought this up, and it's something we do need to be focused on and talking about. My focus on this has been supporting the organizations that are on the front lines on this. So whether it's nonprofits that help young people who either have been victims of trafficking or who fight against human trafficking or try to find these individuals who are doing it and bring them to justice. There's a few national nonprofits that I've been connected to through an organization that I've been a part of. There's some people who are leading on this, and maybe I wonder if I can get one of them to be on a podcast or to do an interview with me to talk about it. That really would be awesome. Tabitha, I'll see if I could get one of them to join us because the work that they're doing is incredible. And so I've been proud to support their work. I've been proud to donate to their organizations and help raise awareness. So they really are on the front lines of that. When it comes to law enforcement, I know early on I advocated for a number of bills and a number of changes within Illinois law that would allow law enforcement to use social media. Now, this seems obvious now, but actually there still are limited opportunities for law enforcement to be able to go onto social media. I remember vividly a few years ago, law enforcement officers showing me that they had this individual that they wanted to be able to arrest because this individual put on their Facebook photos of them holding guns and with substances behind them, and they didn't have the authority to do so because they didn't have the authority to go onto their Facebook, even though they knew this person lived in their town, but they couldn't do anything about it because they didn't have that jurisdiction. So there absolutely is a need. I know there has been some improvements on this. It's happening at the local level, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe there's been some improvement on this at the state level as well. So I know there's movement, but it's something that I have spoken out about because I've worked with a lot of law enforcement agencies. I've elected a number of county sheriffs throughout the suburban region. So I've really had an opportunity to see this, and then working with state's attorneys. My company has the company I was previously at had elected a number of state's attorneys as well. So I've seen sort of the challenges on this front, and I can certainly commit to making sure our law enforcement has the resources they need, but even more importantly, the authority and the jurisdiction to be able to go online and use modern tools to be able to track individuals. Careful about that word track, because we're going to talk flock next, so I got to be careful about that word. But utilizing modern technology, utilizing social media, utilizing AI, when there are individuals who, especially when it comes to human trafficking and child trafficking, we need to be able to utilize modern technology. And I know there are federal resources on this. We've got to make sure that our local departments can work with federal departments on this, which I know, again, that flock conversation comes up. So I will get into that next, I promise. What additional steps would you take as governor to strengthen Illinois' efforts to identify, prosecute, and monitor child predators while providing resources for victims and prevention programs? This is where I don't want to just talk to talk? This is a really good question. And I'm going to tell you, I don't have an answer for you right at this moment, Tabitha. I can commit to one of my best friends is a state's attorney who's worked in this space, and I will absolutely reach out to him and have a conversation. Maybe I'll reach out to you directly on social media since you asked this question on Facebook, or we can bring it up in a future live. I certainly think that more needs to be done. What I don't know is where are the holes? What needs to, what are the challenges and what isn't being done right now in that space? That's something I don't have an answer to yet, but I'll certainly commit to getting that answer. Flock was a big part of your question, so let me get to that part of this. So for those who maybe haven't seen, the Republican candidate in this race, Darren Bailey, has taken a very strong stance on Flock and has come out and said that he wants to ban the cameras. This is an interesting stance from the head of the limited government party, though not entirely surprising because we see this a lot out of Darren Bailey and his campaign. We start to have a conversation about a challenge that exists and work that needs to be done, and he sort of just jumps in with, well, then just ban them. There's no room for, thought, critical thinking, actual effort put into do things the right way. Let's just ban everything. That apparently is Darren Bailey's answer to all the world's problems, which doesn't really work. Let's be clear. You can ban Flock, and I understand those who don't want a surveillance state and think the solution is just to ban Flock. But the problem is the surveillance state, as some may describe it, is in more than just one type of camera or one company's cameras or one type of technology. And so I do believe we need to do more work to make sure we don't live in a surveillance state. I hate the fact that I can sit there and have a conversation with my wife about something and then go on Facebook an hour later or social media or browse the web and ads pop up. I never searched for it. This thing just heard me. So there is absolutely work that needs to be done to protect our privacy, whether it's at the federal level or the state level. But the easy, the cheap, the social media solution is just ban them. You can easily post that on Facebook or X, get a lot of likes, and that sounds good, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. And along the way, it creates new problems because law enforcement uses these ALPRs in a very effective way to identify and track criminals. And as Tabitha pointed out, these are things that can be used to help locate missing children. And when you're talking about child trafficking, you need to find them fast. The latest data point on this I heard is if you don't find them within 48 hours, the odds of finding them or finding them alive is extremely slim. And so every minute counts, let alone every hour. And I've worked in a lot of suburban communities with mayors, with local law enforcement, where these ALPRs are very helpful tools for them, especially when you're talking about communities that border Chicago and or Cook County. Because what you had was a situation where, let's say, smash and grabs, or in this case, we're talking about, of course, human trafficking, child trafficking. But you've got criminals who are coming out, in many cases from Chicago. I'm not saying they're all from Chicago, but it is a common problem in the suburbs where you have criminals who are coming out from Chicago taking I-90 or going down I-55 or going up I-94, and they pop off in a community, commit a crime, get right back on the highway, and zip back into Cook County and into Chicago as quickly as possible. This was a bigger problem during the Kim Foxx era in Cook County because the moment they got onto Cook County property or into within the county's borders, they felt like they were safe. I talked to a number of mayors who would tell me stories about how when they would catch criminals and those criminals would be interrogated, they'd ask, was I on the Cook County side or the Will County side? Was I on the Cook County side or the DuPage County side or Lake County side? And I remember one story vividly where the mayor told me that the criminals were being super cocky because they thought they were on the Cook County side, and this was during the Kim Foxx era. They're like, you can't touch us. And then they were informed that they were actually a block over, and they were in Will County. And the look on their face was just ashen, which I thought was hilarious. We do have a better state's attorney in Cook County, so this is a little bit of an improved problem nowadays. But still, you got the same mayor in Chicago, and we're losing our top cop in the city, so that's not something I'd love to see because he was putting in good work on crime. So you still have similar challenges here where criminals will come out, commit a crime, get as quickly as they can back into the city where they feel like and kind of know that they're safe. And so being able to identify them via a camera that sees a license plate, that license plate number is tied to a known criminal, and it could notify local law enforcement to keep an eye on that individual or send a squad car to downtown, wherever that might be, since that's where that car was headed. These are things that are helpful. Now, do we need to make sure that not all of us are constantly being tracked and that information isn't being stored somewhere and it isn't being accessed by the wrong people? That people with different political views than us aren't using these cameras and using this technology and using these databases to try to win political debates or go after people they disagree with? Absolutely. But just banning cameras, flock cameras, doesn't solve all those other problems. It makes you feel better. But I'm sick and tired of politicians who pursue the easy solution that makes them feel better and allows them to put out a social media post or an email or a TV ad or video ad or audio ad that says, look, I'm the greatest, I solved your problem. And then they didn't actually solve your problem. Instead of taking the easy way out on this, we need to sit down. Bring all the stakeholders around the table. So law enforcement, yes, for their needs, but also organizations that focus on privacy, that make sure that our privacy is respected and protected. You got to bring them around the table as well. Bring everyday people who just don't want to be tracked. Let them make sure they have a voice around the table. Bring lawmakers, bring communities, bring everybody around that table that's come up with a comprehensive solution, a collaborative solution, a consensus solution. It's a lot of C words. I like that. Where we can actually find the common sense path here that protects your privacy and my privacy, but doesn't eliminate the ability for law enforcement to use this common sense, modern technology to help keep people safe. And in the case of Tabitha's question, to help identify child traffickers, to help find missing children. These are things I think we can all agree are important things to do. So that was an incredibly comprehensive answer to the question, but that's why I love these lives. It allows me to do so. I want to pop over to, I had, as I said, a number of people who asked these questions about Flock in my chats on social media. So I'm going to pop over to a couple of them and just make sure that I didn't miss any of their nuanced aspects to this. Yeah, someone said this takes away a tool from the police. I had a handful of police officers who contacted me and said they are changing their votes from Bailey and wanted to know where I stood on this. But I think I got through it pretty well, so I can close this and pop back over to the chat and see where else we are in this chat. So let me see. What other questions do you guys have? Someone said, they're not here because they're at Ravinia tonight instead. Well, that sounds like fun. Good choice. I like it. Hopefully you watch afterwards. Next one. All right. Larry, what is your position on the state providing taxpayer funded? See, I edit, make it clear for more people. So forgive me, Larry, but I'm going to edit this just to summarize and make it clearer for people. And I'm probably also give you a little bit of where I stand. State providing state benefits to undocumented immigrants. Please tell us your position on insurance, college tuition, SNAP benefits. Cool. Larry, thanks for the question. So I have a common sense sort of position on this, which is first, when it comes to taxpayer resources, at a time when our taxpayer dollars are limited, I believe we need to be very careful where those taxpayer dollars are spent. And so when we talk about, let's say, healthcare, there's been programs where billions of dollars have been spent on free healthcare for individuals who are non-citizens. Most of that was more towards migrants, though I know some of it did go towards, I think you described them, Larry, as undocumented immigrants. So it's something that I understand a lot of people who care for these individuals and individuals in these communities want to take care of them. When it comes to our tax dollars, they have got to go towards citizens first. And this is somebody who believes strongly in the importance of immigration and is not anti-immigrant. And I've taken some flack for it on the right for my position. But the one area in here that I do agree with people who are more fiscally conservative on this, I would say, is our tax dollars. We cannot be spending that on benefits for non-citizens that our own citizens don't get. So now, common sense things, the same basic protection and safety and infrastructure and everything that every citizen gets, that every person gets in America and Illinois, of course, that should be provided. But when it comes to things above and beyond that, like free health care, our own citizens are struggling to be able to afford their health care. Our young families, kind of the topic of the week, can't afford their health care. I mean, I can just tell you what my wife and I have spent on health care. We had somebody last week who asked, couple versions of this question, but basically, how can I be successful in business, but also say that my wife and I live very modest lives and don't really have much money? One of the reasons for that, I love you, Abby, sorry for saying this, but my lovely wife and all of her health challenges, it has not been cheap. Since the moment that I met her. I love her. It's been worth every penny. But if there's a family who understands how broken our healthcare system is, how expensive things are, even when you have pretty good insurance, it's my wife and I, and how much we have spent on medical care, health insurance, and all the related expenses that go with it. That's not even talking about IVF and how expensive that was to go through, which I know that's more selective. So when we can't even get help as citizens on those things, I struggle using tax dollars for that when it comes to non-citizens. So that's an area that I want to make sure that I'd say I do struggle with. When it comes to college tuition, SNAP benefits, I think when it comes to college tuition, I'd sit in the same category where it's if these are benefits that we don't give to our own citizens. I know there is some college tuition support provided to Illinois citizens, but right now we have Illinois colleges that in order to survive, we're having to take in more and more international students, which I support our universities and certainly support their efforts to bring people in and make sure that they're paying their bills and thriving. But we're already in that kind of a situation where our own citizens in Illinois can't afford college. They can't afford to go to college because it's too expensive. I would rather be investing our tax dollars there. Now, I will say when it comes to education, especially K through 12, every kid, it's in our laws, every kid is supposed to be given an education, and that I absolutely support. It's simply when it comes to college and giving support to individuals, I'm going to focus on our citizens first, because the problem in Illinois when it comes to college tuition is even your in-state tuition in college is unbelievable. Let's talk about that for just a second. When we talk about the challenges young families face, I've had a number of people bring that up because we're kind of in that, kids are going up from one age to the next. And so I've got a number of friends who are either older or their kids are older or both, who are exploring colleges. Their kids are going to college, and they shared the costs of going to college in Illinois and what your in-state tuition is in Illinois. And I know a number of people who have established residency in other states because the in-state tuition you get in other states is significantly more advantageous, less expensive than it is to go to a state school in Illinois. So this is something when we talk about the challenges in Illinois, being able to afford to go to college, to send your kid to college. This is a problem that's universal. I understand this is a problem all throughout America, and we need to do something to modernize our college system in this country because we've not embraced technology, and it shows up in our cost structure. So there's a lot of work to do at the federal level, at the national level, that we're not going to be able to do just as Illinois residents. But what I know we can do is address the fact that it is significantly more expensive to go to a state school, if you're in Illinois, than it is to go to a state school in most other states. That's something we absolutely need to address. So when it comes to providing support to send people to college, I'm going to focus that support on our residents, our citizens in this state. All right, I want to go to the next question here. Another congratulations. Thank you. All right, another question here from Joseph. Given you want to start a movement, all right, so this isn't about young families, but this is cool. Happy to talk about this. Oh, I'm sorry. Tony, you talked about you're sending your son to JJC first and then to a 4-year degree. Yeah, I live in Harper, and Harper's district. And actually, we've been proud to work with Harper College on a number of things. And I do love that idea. And I love our community college system. We have some of the best community colleges in the country here in Illinois. And I've had a chance to get to know some of the people actually at Joliet, at JJC, and there's some incredible people there. As I said, I live in Harper. I've done work over the years with Moraine Valley and some of the other community colleges in Illinois. That's certainly a potential solution, and I do love investing in our community college system in this state because you get an incredible education and it's significantly less expensive. And I love the partnership that happens where they bring in people from the community. And we've been able to work with some of these colleges where they've researched and asked, they've done community engagement and asked local employers, what skills are you looking for in your workforce and your next workers, which that's awesome because that's so responsive. That's local communities, local businesses, even local governments telling their community college, hey, we're going to need over the next 10 years more people who have skills in these areas. And then those community colleges go and teach those skills, which then puts them right into the workforce productively and gives those kids an opportunity to make a bunch of money and have good paying careers. That is an awesome system. And so it is an area that I really like to focus on because I think it's not just a more effective way to approach education, but it is the wave of the future where you see even a lot of high schools are doing things like career pathways, and they're doing the portrait of a graduate to identify what the community and what local businesses want to see in their graduates. And so I do love this. I think the more we can do this in school, going up into community college, and then getting them out to the workforce is a great thing for our communities. So Tony, thanks for bringing that up because it gave me an excuse to talk about community colleges. Okay, going back to Joe. He asked about the fact that we're starting a movement outside the two-party system. Why run as an indie instead of a third party? So for those of you who don't know this, one of the benefits of running as a third party is if you get 5% of the vote. That establishes you as no longer a new party, but an established party. And as an established party, your petition signature requirement is significantly lower in the next election. So the point that Joe is making here is a valid one. And I can tell you that our leadership team and the over 100 people that behind the scenes were helping us build this campaign and build this movement. And now it's several hundred people who are helping advise it. But back then it was about 100, a little over 100. We had in-depth discussions about that very thing, about do we do this as independent or do we do it as third party? Obviously, you guys can see we chose to go the independent route. There's a number of reasons for that. My personal reason for it is it felt really disingenuous to me to go to voters and say the two-party system is broken. Political parties are the problem, but I've got a new party for you. It just came across as a used car salesman to me. I think we got to take this step by step. And as somebody who has taught sales in business and as somebody who has taught persuasion in government and politics, I can tell you it is infinitely harder, not 2 times harder, infinitely harder to persuade people of 2 things at a time instead of 1. And when the political system and the calendar already disadvantages third-party and independent candidates by forcing us to file so late that we only get 4 months to campaign, while the major party candidates get over a year, I have a extremely limited window here to campaign. And so convincing people to break free from the two-party system and vote for a new party they've never heard of before strategically didn't seem like that was something that was going to be possible to do. I would also say that our sights are set higher than 5%. I know a number of people who are close friends of mine who have looked at previous independents and third-party candidates and seen them get 3-4% of the vote. The highest, I think, was 9% in Illinois over the last few decades. They have put the target at, we'd love to see you get over 5. I can tell you that my sights are set much higher than 5%, both in this election and in the future. We're not going to fix the broken system by begging for scraps and ending up at 5.1% and ooh, yippee, we lowered our petition count in the next election. If we're going to actually fix things, if we're going to actually change things in Illinois, we have got to set our sights much higher than that. And that's what we're focused on. This movement that we're building is so much more than just trying to get to 5% of the vote so it's a little bit easier for our candidates to make it on the ballot next time around. We're looking to accomplish so much more than that. We want to actually change the broken system in Illinois. And the way you do that is by aligning with people on we're going to be outside the system itself. I'm not saying that down the road we don't start a party. There are multiple paths we can take after November. And I want to see how Illinois responds in the November election. And then immediately after, how the two parties respond. You see, one of the benefits of being independent is that we can back good Democrats and good Republicans. We can align with good Democrat or good Republican ideas. If you have your own party, you can only back your party. That's kind of part of the problem. That's part of why I left the two-party system. Because I was stuck in this world where Democrats had a good idea. I would admit it, because we don't have a monopoly on good ideas on our side of the aisle versus the other side of the aisle. And I'd get attacked. You're a bad blank because, they're evil. They can't ever have a good idea. It's crazy to me. And so I want to be able to say, no, you know what? Best idea wins. And that means if it's a Republican idea or a Democrat idea, if it's a conservative idea or a liberal or progressive idea, if it's a third party idea, libertarian, or maybe the Independence Party gives it another go. I know they're in court right now and I wish them luck on their fight. I don't care where a good idea comes from. I just care that it's a good idea. So I really do love the idea of being able to be independent where you don't have to play these political party games, where you can work with reasonable people no matter what their political affiliation might be. And so post-November, as we see kind of how the parties respond to this, and my hope is they see this as the threat, the long-term threat that it is, and they both come back to reasonable, and then you may not need our independent movement or a third party. Because if we could get these parties to come back to being reasonable and working together and allowing moderates to have a home in one or both of the parties, then you don't need a third party or an independent movement. I don't expect that that's what's going to happen, to be honest, because the parties are kind of doing this and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. But I'm certainly going to encourage them to come back to reasonable, to come back to common sense. Well, we've got to give them that chance. Even if they fail that test, you got to let them try. You got to give them a chance. So we got to see what happens after November. I'd imagine the next presidential race, this country is going to keep careening to both extremes. So if that happens, yes, we're going to still need a home in the middle, and that's where us continuing to build this space, this independent movement is going to be important. I will say we do have some strong supporters of what we're doing who want the third party route. And so we will have that discussion post-November, and we will seriously consider it. I'll admit I am leaning more towards sticking on the independent side if we're going to keep moving forward, which I expect we're going to keep moving forward. And the reason for that is because then we can be an entity that the public can trust. They can come to our movement because we're going to be that entity that says, you know what, when you hear from us, we're not giving you a special interest position because of that aligns with our backers or our party position. We're not giving you just the talking points on one side or the other. We're going to give you the facts, just like you've seen during my campaign. We're just going to give you the facts. And sometimes I'm going to say the facts align more with the Democrat, and sometimes the facts might align more with the Republican position. But that's how you build trust with the public and the electorate. If they know that when they come to you, you're always going to give them the truth and you're never going to pick sides just because of political reasons, that means they're going to come to you and trust you. And that's the trust I want to build with voters in this campaign. And it's the long-term trust that I want our movement to have with voters, because that's how you have an impact on the political process. You see, we don't need 51% to have an impact on the political process in Illinois. Certainly, I'd love to win in November and beat my opponents. But long-term, you want to have an impact. Because we're situated in the middle, we only need to have our movement only needs to be as big as the winning margin. Most of these races are won and lost on 10, 12, 15%, all throughout the suburbs. All these battleground districts, most of them are within that 10 to 15%. And so even if we only get 10%, 12%, 15% in our race, guess what? That's the 15% in the middle. That's the winning margin for most of these congressional races, legislative races, local races. And so suddenly you're going to see a world where both parties are going to have to come to us. Because if we oppose their candidate in that next election, they might lose. And so this is how the middle can have an influence on politics and elections. We don't need 51%. We don't need to have a whole political party with candidates in every single district all throughout the state. What we need to be is an entity that the public, that the voters trust, that they know that we will always tell them the truth, that we will always tell them which candidates are controlled by special interests and party bosses and which ones are not. If that's what they trust in us, that's how we can change things in Illinois in 2026, 7, 8, 9, 30, and beyond. All right, let me see if anybody else has questions here on families. So let me pop over to the list thank you, Lane, for keeping this list. Let me pop over because I know we had some that came in via email and I want to get to them. All right, let's talk about this. One of the challenges hold on, I had a second thing come up. Sorry, guys. One of the challenges I know for working families is housing. It's something my wife and I are facing where we're still in our starter home. This was supposed to be our short-term home. And it was one of these days when I have more time, I'll share kind of a miracle that we found this place. Talk about sometimes my faith is important to me. I won't ever force it on you, but it is important to me and my family. And sometimes God provides in moments where you absolutely need him to. And there's an amazing story around our house that I'll share in the future, or you're welcome to ask me on social media afterwards and I'm happy to share it. But anyways, this house even was just a miracle in a bit of a way. So we are grateful for it, but we outgrew it a long time ago. So how we're going to fit a second child in this house when we struggle to fit Teddy and us in this house, I honestly do not know. My wife and I are being kept up at night thinking about that fact. And with how much we've put into building this movement and this race, the timing's not great because it should be going into a new house right now. We didn't know that we were going to be having a child when we made that commitment, so here we are. I could come through on my commitments, but God's going to have to provide here. I can tell you that. But we're going to be looking to see kind of what happens for us. But this is something that's not unique to us. I can't tell you. Housing was the main thing that came in from young families that they face. Everyone mentioned the cost of diapers and necessities that people need. And a few people heard that I've talked about modernizing the sales tax and eliminating it on things that young families need, those basics that young families need. So we've already covered that before. I think I talked about it last week. So I don't want to be repetitive. I'll skip past it. So let's talk about housing because I posted earlier today that Illinois is second worst in the country over the last year in permitting for new housing. If you want to see that, go on my social media. There's a map on each of my social media profiles where I show the numbers that we're not building here in Illinois. The number of builders, developers who I've been connected to in the course of this run who have said they used to build houses, apartments, condos here in Illinois, and they're not anymore. So many of them have told me they're building in northwestern Indiana or even just northern Indiana. We've got some friends over there and they've sent photos, they've sent stories about just how they're growing exponentially in that region. Some have moved to southeast Wisconsin, not as many, but some. Especially some of my Lake County contractor friends have shot up north over the border. And I've heard it a lot. Saw it on this map, how Wisconsin and Indiana are almost triple the per capita rate of new permits that are being issued for housing in those states. And of course you get those Pritzker bots, there's Pritzker bots and Bailey bots. You get those Pritzker bots who say, well, this is a problem everywhere. But this is why I like posting comparisons. Because yes, housing is a problem everywhere. I will certainly grant that. But when you compare your state's performance to another's performance, that gives you an apples to apples comparison. And yeah, Indiana and Wisconsin are facing the same national housing challenges that Illinois is, the same inflation that Illinois is, the same expenses and labor costs and everything else that Illinois is, and yet they're triple almost our permitting. So don't give me this, it's just a national problem. Stop covering for J.B. Pritzker and his failures. His solution to this was to push the Build Act, which was never going to pass in Springfield. Anybody who has spent more than 5 minutes down in Springfield will tell you that some of the most powerful voices in Springfield are local government leaders, especially local mayors. Your state legislators want to get reelected. and having their local mayors go after them in their next election or challenge them in their next election, when local mayors are some of the few popular politicians left in this state. Not a single one of the legislators want to see that happen. And so going after directly, because Pritzker's Build Act went after municipalities, was a recipe for failure, and everyone knew that was a recipe for failure. But you see, this is one in a long line of policies that J.B. Pritzker has pushed forward where the intent was never to fix the problem. The intent was to be able to say he tried to fix the problem, because then he can use that in his future ambitions, whether he's using it in this election against Darren and me or using it in his national campaigns, which are coming very soon. That was all he wanted. This was never something that was intended to actually get done. And it's very telling that this governor continues to go after local governments. I posted over the weekend where JB attacked yet again our school districts and our municipalities and blamed them for all of the property tax problems, which let's talk about that next. This is common for JB. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never, hey, let me stand up and take responsibility for what just happened. He's 7.5 years in as our governor, and he still refuses to take responsibility for anything that happens under his watch. Watch my social media. There's something every other day. There was a shooting in East St. Louis, still refuses to take responsibility. There's a travesty and controversy after controversy that are costing lives in our Department of Corrections, and JB refuses to take responsibility. He refuses to take responsibility for the Department of Child and Family Services, DCFS, and the number of kids who have died there in the heartbreaking problems at DCFS. He has refused to take responsibility for the problems in our licensing department and procurement, and it's on and on and on. And so housing is yet another space where Pritzker wants to blame everybody else, but the reality is there are things that we can and should do to be able to get more housing built here in this state, which would then solve our problem. Because when you're building new housing, especially more affordable housing, you create a lane for young families to be able to afford that house, or maybe it's seniors who are downsizing to be able to have a house they can go to. But when you're not building that, your inventory stagnates and costs shoot through the roof. And we know the national challenges. We know that so many people are sitting on interest rates that were so low that it's basically free money. So they don't want to sell and pay off that mortgage to get one that's twice as expensive on the interest rate. So yeah, there are national challenges. We've got to know that as state policymakers, that there's a disincentive right now for homeowners to ever want to leave that home because they're paying a ridiculously good mortgage rate. And so when you don't have inventory being built up, that's yet another reason why, or another thing that gets added to the pile, reason for those homeowners to not want to move to a different home. Property taxes. Hold on, let me finish on the Build Act. So I'm not in favor of the Build Act, but I don't want to just only talk about things that I'm not in favor of. So I do want to point you to the Illinois Municipal League came out with their plan, and I think it is extremely well done. I'd say 90% of it aligns with things that I was saying prior to this Build Act and IML fight. I got to look up what their IML's plan, what it was called. Because I'm blanking on what it was called. I will bring that up as I'm talking. But there were things that on my podcast I was talking about the Real Housing Act. There we go. You can look it up. There were things that I was talking about on my podcast that we needed to see, and then I saw IML's plan, and I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I've been saying that. There's a path here to get this done by lowering construction costs, which, yes, will require some streamlining of regulations at the state level and also at the municipal level. But instead of doing it Pritzker's way, where you force municipalities, zoning changes on municipalities, that is a one-size-fits-all approach that make every municipality, whether it's suburban, urban, or rural, look just like Chicago's zoning. That's not the path. The way that IML approached it, which I think is innovative and I love it, is an incentive-based structure, where you create incentives for local communities to streamline their regulations, their permitting process, so it becomes less expensive for new housing and for development and construction, while also making it faster for these builds to start. I really like that approach. And so there's some areas in there where there's kind of a fight going on between realtors and IMLs. There were some digs back and forth between each of them that I wish we could do without, because I think realtors and municipal leaders all agree that we need to get building again and we need to address this problem. So let's stop maybe attacking each other and focus on just solving the problem. That's my one request. The other aspect is lowering property taxes. We absolutely need to address property taxes. I spent the last 10-ish minutes on last week's live talking about property taxes. So again, I don't want to be duplicative. I'll ask you, jump back to last week's, watch that last 10 or so minutes of property taxes. I'll talk about it again, a lot more in the coming months. But since it's 55 minutes in, I'm running short on time. So I won't dive into it again here. But yes, we absolutely must lower property taxes because it's a huge reason why people can't afford their homes. It's a huge reason why people can't afford to buy a new home. And so it's something we must address and do something about. All right, let me look at what else we got here. Ooh, this is a good one I want to talk about. I like that this one came in. We're going to talk about this one in a second. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anybody in our chat. So give me 1 second. Cost of childcare. Will, thanks for putting that in. There are... I don't remember what study I found, and I posted it on my social media probably 2 or 3 months ago, so I'm going to blank on it. But there was a study done on this, on how significantly high the percentage of the cost of raising a child is absorbed in those first handful of years, and it was almost exclusively due to childcare. The cost of childcare is now rivaling things like cost of college for some. I mean, it's astronomical. It is ridiculous. And it's certainly a challenge because you're talking about a decision that one or both of your parents have to make then on, can we afford childcare, or does one of us or both of us have to take a break from our careers in order to be able to afford to raise this child? It's a significant problem. And where Illinois makes this harder, I kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, and we talked about it last week, Lou and I, on our podcast, is licensing. The challenges with licensing in Illinois hit our daycare centers tremendously. I actually, back before I took this leap to be a candidate, I did a whole lot of polling around the country, and we did a lot of polling actually around what people were interested in seeing as the solution to our problems with not having enough childcare and not having affordable childcare. And some of this comes down to, or actually a lot of it comes down to labor, workers, finding enough people who will do that job. It's an incredibly difficult job. The pay is not amazing, which would kind of shock you based on how much you're paying for that childcare. And a lot of it comes down to the challenges of getting that license to be able to become a child care provider. And so there are ways that can be streamlined. Now, I will caution you that polling was interesting because there are some things that the public is just not interested in at all, even if it saves them money. Things that surround the loosening of the requirements, whether it's background checks and the amount of time required to be taught the skills and practice those skills as a child care provider. Americans and Illinoisans had no interest in loosening a lot of that. So that would lower costs, but people aren't interested in reducing safety of our children just to be able to lower costs. So that's an area that we can't touch. But where we can is, number one, Illinois being much better about issuing certificates and licenses as they're earned, because right now it takes way too long, sometimes 6 months or longer, to be able to get that license that you've earned. So that's number one. Number two, being able to build in apprenticeships and ways that young people can learn these skills on the job, where they're still going to be learning from somebody who's licensed. There's still going to be somebody there in the room who has the necessary training and licensing and everything else, but be able to give young people exposure to what could be a career for them, something we need them to consider pursuing, while also counting them towards the number of people that have to be in the room legally to provide that childcare. Again, you have to be careful about this to make sure there's still at least a baseline of people who are above a certain age and have the necessary education and license and everything else. But we can say that a portion of that could maybe be covered by apprentices or interns or whatever terminology you want to use. This is something that other states have pursued. It's something that I think we could certainly look at in Illinois to try to bring down these costs. And then another area that we can look at is something I've put a lot of time and effort into, which is early childhood education. It's somewhere where I know I give J.B. Pritzker a lot of grief and I attack him a lot, but I always want to be fair. There are some areas where the governor has done good things, and early childhood education is one of those areas. With the work that has been done with the new department, with the work that's been done to work with local schools, to try to increase access to preschool at your local school district, because in many school districts, they don't have the space and they don't have the staff to be able to provide that. And so they can only provide to the people who absolutely must be allowed access, those with mental health challenges or extra needs according to state law and even federal law. These are individuals that must be given access to preschool first. And so that's where these local school districts have to start. But when they have more space, when they have more budget and more staff, they can open it up to the public. And I don't know that there's a single school district that I have worked with who hasn't said that they have a waiting list for preschool, that they have more people who want access to their preschool than they're able to allow into it. Every district that I've worked with has said that. And so more work can be done in that educational space to be able to provide early childhood learning. And then also that is what is essentially free childcare for parents for a portion of the day. Might be a half day, might be a full day, but it's something that can help alleviate that burden on working families. And so I want to work with school districts. I want to work with community colleges. With school districts, it's about providing that space and the teachers that are needed. When it comes to community colleges, it's about providing those career pathways. And I guess that also could be with some of our high schools to try to get more young people to go into this field, because right now there's just a lack of workers and a lack of talent in that space. So there's a lot that we can do, but we've got to put some effort into it, because I know this is one of the biggest burdens that people face. And I can tell you the only reason why my wife and I aren't having to face that is my wife is able to work from home, and she's also willing to work part-time so that she can focus on raising Teddy and now giving birth to our next child. So my wife has made tremendous sacrifices for our family, and it's the only reason why we're not having to bear the brunt of that cost for childcare. Will, I know, I'm sure this is something that you have faced, and I'm sure it's something that many of you who are watching this have faced. This is absolutely something we need to do more of, and I don't feel like even I've got the full solution at the moment, but I can tell you this: we are working on our full platform, and we have several experts who have expertise in that space who are giving us advice. So when we do roll out our full platform, there's going to be a whole section on the challenges young families face, and specifically on how we can make childcare more accessible and more affordable in Illinois. So awesome question, Will. Thank you. I'm going to make this one the last one. This one came in via email, and I saw it, and I've been waiting to bring it up. Let's talk about IVF. This is a challenge for young families who are facing fertility problems and being able to afford IVF. And I will say, Illinois is one of the better states at funding IVF, at insurance covering IVF. There are still plenty of holes within that. I speak from experience that as the earlier efforts to address your fertility challenges do not work, doctors then move to more and more things that they want to try, basically. And many of those things are not covered. And so if the first few rounds don't take, even though insurance in Illinois does a very good job compared to other states, it can get then to those prohibitively expensive ranges that you see that some other states pay even for the first few rounds. So Illinois does good early, but later on we fall off. So there's work we can do on IVF, but I always want to be fair. I do want to give credit. There's some bills that have been passed down in Springfield that were bipartisan bills that have helped with this. One in particular that I'll talk about here in a second. J.B. Pritzker has signed these bills. He's talked about how important they are. And so while I'll always point out where J.B. is wrong, I'll also be honest where he's right. And he has been pretty good on IVF, and I'll give him credit for that. My Republican opponent, on the other hand, has not been. I am frustrated by this, because not only has he been somebody who has been anti-IVF for years, many of the people that he is close with, some of his closest supporters, have not only been strongly IVF. They've said some pretty awful and ridiculous things, things that I have fought back against over the years. And these are all people that surround Darren Bailey. And when you want to know how somebody's going to govern, look at who they surround themselves with. I mentioned a bill that was a very good bill that was passed, HB 3709. I think that was 2021, but don't quote me on the exact year. I know it was in that session. Only 6 senators voted against it, of course. Darren Bailey was one of them. A majority of Republicans voted for this bill, which expanded access to IVF in Illinois, including some that are extremely pro-life who voted for this bill. But of course, Darren Bailey did not. We've seen him, he urged his supporters to vote against the 2024 IVF referendum, parroting talking points from Illinois Family Institute, Illinois Family Action in their opposition. And along with IFA's leader, David Smith, they have actively attacked those who have used IVF, including me, by the way. David Smith has multiple times attacked me and my wife for utilizing IVF to start our family, and Darren Bailey has not denounced that, and I've remembered that. I also pushed back on some IVF things back during my podcast, and Darren Bailey's running mate was on one of those and suspiciously sat silent because he didn't want to anger the conservative base with taking a position on IVF. And you see that out of the Bailey campaign right now, actively trying to not talk about IVF. And I want them to go on the record on their stance, because either Darren Bailey has flip-flopped on this, just like he's flip-flopped on 7 or 8 other issues, or he's still anti-IVF. And the voters deserve to know. Young families deserve to know. I would like to know, especially as somebody who's been attacked by Bailey and his supporters, for my position on IVF, for the fact that IVF is the reason why I even have my family. We wouldn't have Teddy if it wasn't for IVF. Remember I said earlier, my faith is important to me. Yes, Teddy is a gift from God. God often works through we humans. And so you can have 2 things at once. Teddy can be a medical miracle while also being a gift from God. Both things can be true. But this idea, these people who are extremists, who are against IVF, there have been, let me pull this up, millions of babies who've been born because of IVF. Here's the number, 13 million babies have been born because of IVF. You can't tell me you're pro-life. You can't tell me you're pro-family and also be anti-IVF. As a matter of fact, I did an op-ed on this that I put out a few years ago. At the time, I still was a part of the Republican Party, and I was heartened to point out the fact that there was some polling at the time that asked conservatives, that asked Republicans, that asked pro-lifers, that asked evangelicals how they felt about IVF, and a significant majority of every single one of those demographics strongly supported IVF. Of those who identify as pro-life, 78% supported IVF a couple years ago. I'd imagine that number is the same, if not more. 83% of evangelicals. So you want to know how extreme Darren Bailey is? He's in the 17%, the 22%. He's even more conservative than those groups that I just mentioned in being anti-IVF. This is crazy to me. And frankly, it's personal to me. When you go after the fact that, I'm pro-family in that I wanted to have children, and those children, my boy Teddy, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for IVF. So we're going to be talking about this because I would like to know from Darren Bailey and his campaign where they stand today on IVF. I would welcome a flip-flop. If he's willing to finally see the light and see common sense and say that he's going to support IVF in Illinois, I'll welcome that flip-flop. If he's not, then tell us. We deserve to know before we go vote in November. But either way, I can tell you from me, you're going to have a governor in Illinois who continues to be a leader on IVF, who continues to be a leader on fertility treatments, on supporting young families. Because we need to do more to support our young families. That starts with helping young families conceive. That starts with helping them be able to know they can afford to raise a family, so they might be willing to try to start their family in this state. And then as they go through the process, working to lower their medical costs and their medical bills so they can afford the process of giving birth, of being pregnant in the woman's case. And then after that baby is born, being able to actually be able to afford to raise that child here in Illinois. You elect me as your governor, you're going to have somebody who helps young families in that process, because our state right now isn't growing. It isn't just that we're not building, whether it's housing or commercial. It isn't just that we're not bringing businesses into Illinois or helping our current businesses thrive. We're also not growing from a population standpoint. Our birth rate, our fertility rate in this state is lower than much of the rest of the country. And I would hazard to say that much of that is, because I've heard this from young families, they'd like to start a family, but they can't afford to do so in this state. It's prohibitive in Illinois. So let's address that. If young couples, young people aren't yet ready to start their families, I get it. I understand that. I've got some people working on our campaign that aren't ready to start that, and I respect their decision. But what I don't want is young people choosing not to start a family because they can't afford to do so in Illinois. That's something we can address, and that's something that we absolutely must address. I've gone over our time. My producer's been waving his hands because we're over time, but this has been a really good discussion. So just to drive him crazy, I'm going to take one more look, make sure we haven't missed anything before we close this down here. Looks like we're good. Look over at my producer. Looks like we're good. All right. So with that, let's close this down. I really appreciate everybody who joined us, those who joined us last week, those who joined us this week. Looked like we had 15 times as many people who then joined in afterwards versus who stayed during the live last week. But those who were on the live were there for a significant period of time. And that's what I want. That's what I've asked for, is for us to have conversations and discussions. There's plenty of time for the 3-sentence social media posts. And yes, we'll do those. But these lives are our opportunity to dive into policy and actually get into it, because you deserve to know where your governor stands on things. And we all have media teams. They're really good at editing and cutting and making sure that everything looks good and our candidates sound good. And I've done that for 20 years. So I know what it's like to be the guy behind the guy and make sure they don't ever say anything stupid, that they always sound smart on policy. But I want to be an open book for you all. And sometimes, like I did today, I'm going to tell you, I don't know yet. I'll work on it. I'll have an answer by November before I'm elected. But ultimately, that's the open door policy you're going to have with me, both as a candidate and potentially as your governor, because it's all about us working together to solve the problems that Illinois faces. That doesn't happen if you're J.B. Pritzker and you just put forward poll-tested initiatives that would help your national ambitions, that poll well with the Democratic primary audience nationwide. And that doesn't happen if you're Darren Bailey and you have no interest in actual policy. You're just going to post a few sentences on social media that get you the most amount of likes. Neither of those are a path to fixing our problems in Illinois. So that's what I'll continue to commit to you, that we will keep sharing policy. We will keep talking about policy. We've got some really exciting things coming up where we're going to dive deep into important policies in Illinois. That's what you're going to get from the Collin Corbett for Governor campaign. That's what you're going to get from the independent movement well beyond November. So stick around. It's going to be a heck of a ride. Thank you to everybody who shared their congrats on baby number 2. I'm going to go home and make sure my wife's fed and maybe give her a foot rub, because she's had a pretty long day taking care of Teddy and dealing with me and dealing with the announcement and dealing with everything else. So I love you, Abby. Thank you guys for being here with us. We'll catch you next week on Live from the Lincoln Desk.